We live in a world where people think they can cover up the truth with words. They assume if they say the right thing, the story will be believable, the suspicion will vanish, and the problem will disappear. But here's the thing most people forget. Your behavior, your tone, your micro-reactions, those speak louder than anything that comes out of your mouth. The way you stand when you're talking, the way your eyes shift, how quickly you respond, whether your voice goes up or down, whether you smile or look tense. These are the little tells that give you away. And we're all wired to notice them even if we can't put them into words. I've interviewed countless people in high-pressure situations, witnesses, suspects, even ordinary folks. And here's something I've learned: words are cheap. Anybody can memorize a line, but you cannot fake your natural patterns for long. When you are telling the truth, your body and your words work together without friction. There's a rhythm, a calmness, even if the topic is uncomfortable. But when you're hiding something, your brain has to work twice as hard. One part of your mind is trying to maintain the story, the other part is trying to suppress the truth. That tension leaks out. It might be in a hesitation before you answer. It might be in repeating the same phrase over and over because you're buying time. It might be in a sudden change of tone, like going from calm to defensive in a snap. Most people think deception is about creating a convincing lie. In reality, deception is about controlling yourself under stress. And the harder you try to control your words, the more your behavior betrays you. Imagine you're standing in the kitchen, and someone asks you a casual question. "Hey, where were you last night?" If you're telling the truth, you just answer. You say, "Oh, I went to dinner with Sarah," and you keep stirring the pasta. But if you're hiding something, suddenly your brain freezes for half a second. You might look up too quickly or too slowly. You might change your tone. "Why are you asking me that?" You might add extra details nobody asked for. "I was just with Sarah. You know Sarah from work. We were at that Italian place on 3rd. You know, the one with the red awning." That's not natural. That's your brain overcompensating. People who are unfaithful often underestimate how much their daily patterns give them away. They think as long as they keep their story straight, they're safe. But in reality, the people closest to them don't just listen to the story. They notice the pauses, the micro smiles, the shifts in attention. They notice how your phone is suddenly face down all the time. How you used to share everything, but now you're more guarded. Even the way you respond to simple questions can change, faster, sharper, or oddly delayed. You may not even be aware you're doing it, but it's there. The human brain picks up on these things subconsciously. That's why someone will say, "I don't know why, but I just feel like something's off." Their mind has noticed inconsistencies even if they can't articulate them. Behavior is also harder to disguise because it's tied to your emotions. When you're lying, your emotions don't always line up with your words. You might say, "Of course I love you," but your body is slightly turned away, your arms are crossed, or you're looking past the person instead of at them. You might say, "I'm not hiding anything," but your tone is tight and your shoulders are tense. That's why behavior experts say that congruence, the alignment between your words, your tone, and your body language, is one of the strongest indicators of honesty. If those three aren't in sync, something's wrong. The irony is that the more someone insists I'm telling the truth without being accused, the more suspicious it can sound. Confident truth tellers don't need to keep announcing their honesty. It's obvious. But people who are hiding something often feel the need to sell their innocence, so they add unnecessary emphasis, repeating "I swear" or "honestly," or "you can trust me," like a nervous tick. It's not the phrase itself that's suspicious, it's the frequency and the timing. When those words show up in situations where they don't naturally belong, they become red flags. And here's something important to understand. This isn't just about catching someone else. It's also about catching yourself. Because we all have blind spots. You might not be unfaithful in the romantic sense, but you might be hiding something else. A financial problem, a mistake at work, a decision you regret. And you may not even realize that your behavior is broadcasting the truth. The people who know you best will pick up on it, even if they can't explain how. So if you want to live with integrity, start paying attention to the small, subtle ways your actions align, or don't align, with your words. One of the fastest ways to build trust is to make sure your words and behavior are telling the same story. That means slowing down before you speak, removing unnecessary details, and answering questions directly without over-explaining. It means being comfortable with a moment of silence instead of rushing to fill it. And it means checking your body language. Are you open, facing the person, relaxed? Or are you closed off, guarded, fidgeting? People may not consciously notice every cue, but they'll feel the difference. At the end of the day, the truth is a lot lighter to carry than a lie. Lies require constant maintenance. You have to remember what you said, who you said it to, how you said it. The truth, it doesn't need upkeep. It's consistent every time you tell it, and your behavior naturally matches your words. So if you're trying to hide something, remember this. You might fool someone for a while with a story, but your behavior will eventually speak the truth for you. One of the most reliable signs that something is off in a conversation is unnecessary justification. Think about it. When you're confident in what you've done and you know it's above board, you just explain it once and move on. But when there's guilt, insecurity, or fear of being caught, the natural reflex is to pile on explanations, reasons, and excuses, often without anyone asking for them. It's almost like a verbal smokescreen. The person is hoping that if they keep talking, you'll stop looking too closely. Let's break this down. Imagine someone asks a simple question. Hey, were you at the office late yesterday? A straightforward, truthful answer is short and clear. Yes, I was catching up on a project. Done. But if someone is trying to hide something, they might respond with something like, yeah, I was at the office late because, traffic was really bad, and I had this report, and then John called, and then I had to. Well, you know how it is. That's a lot of extra information nobody asked for. Why? Because they're subconsciously trying to convince both you and themselves that their story is solid. The same thing happens with deflection. Instead of answering the question directly, they shift the focus to you. Why are you even asking me that? Do you not trust me? Now, instead of them explaining their actions, you're suddenly defending your right to even bring it up. That's a classic move to change the emotional terrain. They're trying to get you on the defense. If so, you stop pressing for details. And here's the kicker. A lot of people don't even realize they're doing it. It's a defense mechanism wired into the brain when we feel threatened. Guilt and fear are powerful motivators for this behavior. When someone's conscience is nagging at them, even a neutral question can feel like an accusation. So they overcompensate, throwing in "I swear" or "you have to believe me" before you've even expressed doubt. They're not responding to what you've said, they're responding to the fear of what you might say next. And this is why paying attention to patterns matters. If someone has a one-off defensive moment, it could just be stress. But if they consistently deflect or justify in conversations that should be neutral, that's a sign there's more going on. Another subtle version of this is the over-justified alibi. I've seen people walk themselves into suspicion by providing too much detail about something minor. For example, I was just at the store. I bought eggs, milk, bread, the same bread you like, and then I went to the gas station on 8th because the one on Main was closed, and then I saw Mike there. Remember Mike from the picnic last year? None of that was requested. But they're trying to sound so normal, so ordinary, that it backfires. They forget that truth. Tellers don't rehearse. Here's where it gets interesting. Sometimes the justification isn't even verbal. It can be behavioral. Like someone who's suddenly overly generous, overly attentive, or overly helpful after doing something wrong. They're trying to balance the scales in their own mind. They want to prove, sometimes to themselves more than to you, that they're still good. It's like a guilty conscience trying to rewrite the story through action. The problem is, The change in behavior is so sharp that it's noticeable. If someone goes from indifferent to overly affectionate overnight, that's not just love, it's usually a reaction to something. One thing I tell people is this: pay attention to the moment before and after you ask a question. How does the person react before they open their mouth? Do their shoulders tighten? Do they suddenly get busy with something else, like reaching for their phone or adjusting their clothes? These are micro delays, little ways to buy time to think. They're part of the same family as verbal over-explaining. Both are about avoiding the discomfort of a direct, honest answer. Now, here's the part that trips a lot of people up. Just because someone is justifying or deflecting doesn't automatically mean they're lying. Sometimes people with low self-esteem or people who grew up in environments where they were constantly accused learn to defend themselves out of habit. They explain every move because they expect to be doubted. So before you jump to conclusions, you have to consider the baseline behavior of the person. Is this new, or have they always communicated this way? But in the context of unfaithfulness, changes in communication style are critical. If a person who used to be open and casual with you now suddenly gets defensive or floods you with explanations every time you ask a simple question, you're looking at a behavioral shift. That shift is where the truth often hides, and that's why this keynote is about patterns, not isolated moments. Deflection and justification, when repeated and paired with other subtle changes, avoiding eye contact, becoming vague in other areas, altering routines, become part of a larger puzzle. Alone, they may be nothing. Together, they tell a story. And if you've ever had that gut feeling that something doesn't add up, chances are it's because these little red flags have started to line up in your subconscious. You've noticed the over-talking, you've noticed the sudden "why are you even asking?" You've noticed the shift from sharing openly to defending unnecessarily. The bottom line is this: people reveal more than they realize. When someone starts piling on reasons you didn't ask for, or turning your questions into accusations against you, it's not just conversation, it's strategy. Whether conscious or subconscious, it's an attempt to steer you away from the truth. The trick is to slow down, keep your composure, and let them talk. The more they justify, the more they reveal, because in trying so hard to control the story, they often give away the very details they're trying to hide. Language is one of the most fascinating windows into the human mind because no matter how carefully we try to control it, our subconscious still slips through. The truth is, most of us are not skilled liars. We might think we can keep a secret or maintain a cover story, but the brain has a funny way of revealing what's underneath. The words we choose, the phrases we repeat, even the questions we fire back, these aren't random. They're clues, and when someone is being unfaithful, their subconscious often starts leaving these breadcrumbs without them realizing it. One of the most common examples is what I call defensive framing. This is when someone responds to a neutral or simple question as though it's an accusation. You ask, "Hey, what are you doing later?" and they immediately come back with, "Why, do you think I'm hiding something?" That's not just answering the question, that's layering it with suspicion. It's almost like their brain is playing chess 2 moves ahead, anticipating where you might be going with the conversation, and trying to block it before you even get there. Another subconscious tell is the repeated use of certain reassurance phrases. Words like "honestly," "I swear," "you know I'd never do that," sound fine in isolation. But when they're woven into everyday conversations where there's no reason to be defensive, they stick out. If you hear, "You know I'd never do that," in response to "Did you call your mom today?" that's an overreaction, and it's not about the mom. It's about an underlying guilt that's bleeding into unrelated conversations. The brain doesn't compartmentalize stress perfectly. Then there's the tendency to reverse the roles in the conversation. Instead of answering a question, they become the questioner. Why would you even ask me that? Or don't you trust me? On the surface, this sounds like they are seeking clarity, but subconsciously, it's a way to shift the emotional weight. Now, you're on the spot defending your motives instead of them explaining theirs. And here's what's interesting. People rarely plan this consciously. It's an instinctive defense mechanism. The brain feels cornered, so it changes the terrain of the discussion. Linguistic leaks, those tiny, unintended reveals, are another huge tell. For example, they might accidentally use different pronouns when talking about a situation. They'll say "we went there" when they were supposedly alone, or they might talk about a place as though they've been there recently when their story says otherwise. These slips happen because the brain is juggling two versions of reality at once, the truth and the lie, and the truth often sneaks out first because it's the version that requires less mental effort. Another form of subconscious leakage is unnecessary distancing. Instead of saying "my phone," they might say "the phone." Instead of "my friend Sarah," it becomes "a friend." This slight detachment in language can signal an emotional or moral gap between them and the situation they're describing. It's subtle, but it matters. When we feel connected to something, we claim it. When we feel the need to protect ourselves from association, we push it away linguistically. The subconscious also loves patterns. If you pay attention over time, you might notice the same phrase popping up in similar situations. Maybe every time plans change last minute, they say, "Well, things just happen, you know how it is." Or whenever they're questioned, they drop a line like, "You're overthinking it." At first, it feels casual, but when that same phrase appears repeatedly in moments where they feel pressure, it becomes part of a behavioral signature. They don't even realize they're doing it. It's just the brain reaching for a comfortable, familiar defense. Even tone shifts are part of this. You'll notice certain words are delivered faster, sharper, or at a higher pitch when they're hiding something. That's because lying often triggers a stress response in the body. Heart rate goes up, adrenaline flows, and speech patterns change. The conscious mind is busy crafting the story, but the subconscious can't hide the physiological impact. The voice cracks, the breathing changes, the volume spikes, and again, the person often has no clue they're giving this away. Now, here's where it gets tricky. Not every verbal quirk means someone's lying or cheating. Some people just have a defensive communication style because of how they were raised. Some overuse reassurance phrases out of habit. That's why you have to look at changes over time. If a person who used to answer questions directly now starts dodging, deflecting, or padding everything with "honestly," and "I swear," that's the shift that matters. The pattern is the proof. Understanding subconscious language slips is powerful because it keeps you from getting stuck on the surface of what's being said. You start listening between the lines. You start noticing when someone answers a question you didn't ask, or when they leave out details they would normally include. You notice when they talk about trust more than they talk about truth. That's when you realize you're not just hearing words, you're hearing the emotional state behind those words. The mind has two voices, the one we script for the world and the one that leaks through in unguarded moments. When those two voices start contradicting each other, it's not paranoia to pay attention, it's awareness, and the sooner you learn to spot these slips, the sooner you can separate what's true from what's just noise. Because at the end of the day, people can fake a lot of things, but their subconscious will always fight to be heard. In every healthy relationship, the foundation is not passion, not romance, not even compatibility. It's transparency. Without it, everything else eventually collapses. Transparency isn't about oversharing every passing thought or giving a play-by-play of your day. It's about creating an environment where honesty is the default, not the exception. When you're transparent, You don't have to work so hard to be trusted, because trust becomes the natural byproduct of how you live and communicate. Think about it. When you trust someone, it's not because they've made big speeches about loyalty. It's because their words and actions have consistently aligned over time. They don't disappear for hours without explanation. They don't dodge questions. They don't change their story from one conversation to the next. You trust them because they've shown you that they have nothing to hide, and not by telling you, but by living in a way that makes it obvious. The opposite is also true. When someone's behavior starts to become inconsistent, when their stories get thinner, when their phone suddenly has a passcode you didn't know about, when they become vague about things they used to share freely, it chips away at the foundation. Whether or not they're guilty of something as serious as infidelity, the lack of transparency feels the same in the body. It creates a knot in your stomach. It makes you second guess yourself. And that's because your brain is wired to notice patterns. And when those patterns change, your instinct signals that something is off. Transparency has a protective function in relationships. It's like sunlight. It keeps things clean and prevents shadows from growing. When you hide parts of your life, intentionally or not, those hidden parts start to take on a weight. You have to remember what you've said, what you've left out, who knows what. That's exhausting, and it's a form of stress you carry whether you realize it or not. In contrast, when you live openly, you're lighter. You don't have to maintain a cover story. You don't have to compartmentalize conversations. You just tell the truth, and the truth stays the same no matter how many times it's told. In the context of relationships, transparency also means being proactive about communication. You don't wait for your partner to dig for information, you offer it. You don't get defensive when they ask questions. You see it as part of the natural curiosity that comes with closeness. A lot of people make the mistake of treating questions as threats, but in a healthy relationship, questions are bridges. They're opportunities to connect and understand each other better, and if you're living transparently, you have no reason to fear them. One of the biggest signs of a healthy, faithful relationship is that nothing significant lives in the shadows. That doesn't mean you don't have personal boundaries. It means your boundaries aren't hiding places. If you say you need space, your partner knows it's about recharging, not about secrecy. If you go out with friends, you're upfront about where you are and who you're with, not because you're being monitored, but because you know openness builds trust. Transparency is not about giving up your privacy. It's about giving up your hiding places. Of course, transparency requires courage. It's not always easy to be honest, especially when the truth might disappoint someone or lead to conflict. But avoiding those moments only delays the discomfort and usually makes it worse. If you've ever caught someone in a lie, you know that the betrayal isn't just about what they did. It's about the fact that they chose to hide it. That choice says, I didn't trust you enough to handle the truth. And that cuts deeper than the action itself. When suspicion enters a relationship, transparency is the fastest way to address it. Not defensiveness. Not deflection, just openness. Here's my phone, here's the message, here's the context. Not because you're surrendering your rights, but because you value trust over ego. People who have nothing to hide don't need to build walls, they open doors. And the act of opening those doors sends a powerful message. I want you to feel safe with me. Here's the irony. People who are unfaithful often create more suspicion by overmanaging information. They ration what they share. They avoid certain topics. They lock their devices. They think this is control, but what it really does is highlight the absence of openness. Transparency, on the other hand, is effortless. It's not about crafting a perfect image. It's about letting the truth be visible in real time. In the long run, transparency is not just about protecting your relationship. It's about protecting your own peace of mind. When you're honest and open, you don't live in fear of being found out. You don't have to track your own lies or rehearse your own stories. You can relax into the security that comes from knowing that whatever someone learns about you, it will align with what you've already told them. That's freedom. And in relationships, freedom is what allows love to grow without the weight of constant doubt. The truth is, transparency is less about what you tell someone and more about how you live in front of them. It's in the little moments, how quickly you respond to questions, how consistent your stories are, how willing you are to include them in your world. Those small signals add up, and when they're consistent, they create a safety net that makes the big questions easier to answer because the trust is already there. In the end, transparency is a habit. It's a decision you make daily to live in a way that removes the need for suspicion. If you want a strong relationship, start with this simple rule. Make your words and your reality match so closely that anyone could step into your life and see the same truth you've been telling all along. Because trust isn't built in grand gestures. It's built in the moments when your openness makes it clear you have nothing to hide.